We are Kimberly and Lyle Wick, both licensed marriage and family therapists, mother and daughter.
We have been in the trenches with family addiction and are now passionate about helping others heal and be their best selves.
Hi everyone, I'm Lyle.
And I'm Kimberly.
And we are here to talk to you about 5 steps you can take now if you find out your loved one is struggling with addiction.
So the first step would be to assess your situation. And how do you do that? Think about, am I safe? Do I need to call 911? How dire does the situation seem? Sometimes we underestimate that. We downplay it, and for many different reasons. But the most important thing with assessing the situation is looking at physical safety, emotional safety, and we really encourage you not to be afraid to call 911. Calling 911 is an intervention, and we'll talk about that later. It's the most important thing is safety for yourself, safety for your kids, safety for your loved one.
Yeah, definitely. And the only thing I would add is that in taking care of yourself, let's say worst case, you need to call 911 because you're in fear of your loved one's safety or your safety. In calling 911, really try and stay out of the results of that. So when you're assessing the situation and if you are safe, trying to not go into the results, but to just stick with, am I safe? What do I need to do right now?
And by not to go into the results is like, oh my gosh, what will happen if I call 911? Will my loved one get in trouble? All of those kinds of thoughts that can easily come to our mind. It's important to let go of those, stay in the present moment, and really try to let those worries be placed over in the next room, if you will. And if your situation isn't as dire as we have to figure something out to remove ourselves physically or to call 911, if it's not as dire as that, then we're going to talk about boundaries in the next step.
The next step is to identify and set boundaries. And this can be really tricky when you are just beginning to figure out, one, that your loved one has an addiction, and two, what are you needing in that moment? A lot of times you won't know. And so with that, we come back to breaking it down, making it small, asking for what you need in that moment or what you know you don't need. And we'll go into that more. Do you want to speak to your experience when initially trying to set boundaries?
It's so challenging because if you're just arriving at my situation has become intolerable or changes need to happen, how do I follow through with boundaries? I know for myself, when I first started learning about boundaries and how to set them, it felt very challenging because I was in the results and I was walking on eggshells, which is, being in the results, not wanting to tip the apple cart. I always like to say, if you're looking for what you need to have peace of mind, that will help to inform what boundaries you need to have. And it looks a little bit different if it's a spouse versus a child versus an adult child, but the process of taking care of yourself is very much the same. And in taking care of yourself, that will help to identify what your boundaries are. So for instance, if your loved one drinks at night and you guys are sleeping together and your partner snores, it could be, I can't get adequate sleep if my partner's drinking every night and comes to bed and is snoring and is now drinking most nights versus once in a while because addiction's a progressive disease. It may mean that you have to rethink where you're sleeping. It's when we start to take care of ourselves, it's always really hard to figure out what are these boundaries, because many times if we're dealing with someone who is using or drinking, doesn't have emotional sobriety, isn't accountable for their behavior, they may blame a lot. Like, oh, you're making a big deal out of everything. And there's different kinds of ways to handle those situations. When we set boundaries, it's not just about having the boundary, then how do we follow through with the boundary? And those are things that we'll do when we take a deeper dive into what kind of coping tools and language skills can we use when we're trying to set boundaries and follow through with them.
And so what might it look like with that specific example to tell your partner that you're needing to sleep in a different room?
It could look like, I'll just use my example. When I was married to Lyle's father, it would look like, I'm going to have to figure something out about sleeping after you've been drinking, because you come to bed and you're snoring, and it's really, I can't sleep throughout the night, and it's affecting how I feel during the day. And if he were to come back and say, oh, you're making such a big deal out of this, we've never had that problem before, the first thing out of my mouth would be to acknowledge what he's saying, because that always helps to de-escalate people. I'm really hearing what you're saying. I'm hearing we've never had this problem before. For me, it's a problem now. And so I need to figure something out, because I cannot function during the day when I'm not getting adequate sleep. And everybody's situation is different. What I did actually end up doing is, we had a little, very small room off of the bathroom, and I ended up making myself a bed in there because he wasn't going to move out of our bedroom. And these are like, the setting boundaries are mini interventions, if you will. And what happens is, as we start to take care of ourselves, it changes the dynamic in our relationship. It changes the system and how the system functions. So sometimes things can look worse before they get better. It's kind of like, when we go to the orthodontist and we get braces on, and we get teeth pulled and we get braces on, our mouth looks worse before those amazing straight teeth come out with no braces on. It's a process. So when we start to identify, what are some of my boundaries that I really need to set, then, it's not going to be easy at first, and it might really piss our partners off or our children off if we're taking care of ourselves. And it also can start to shift how the system functions.
Definitely. And I think also it gives us an opportunity to get information about where our partner's at and get clarity on what we need to do moving forward. So the great thing with boundaries is, if you're like, I don't know where to start, really just looking at, okay, what is making you uncomfortable? So for example, my mom with the snoring, like, she couldn't function the next day. And so it didn't have to be a catastrophic boundary of, do I need to divorce him? Do I need to get out of the house? It was a much more simple one, where she stated her needs, kept the focus on herself, and made an adjustment to accommodate herself. And from what I recall and what we've talked about, you received information from that.
I did receive information, and in my situation, recovery wasn't in a straight line. So he wasn't drinking for like 10 months. And at that time, we were sleeping in the same room. It just was like, it was a move here and then a move there. And everybody's situation is different. But if you start with the basics, keep it simple. And when we set boundaries also, it's important to set them with love. And that's really hard to do when we're upset and we're scared. A lot of times we set boundaries with blaming attitudes or anger. And that's our own work in this family disease. We get to learn to be who we really want to be and how we want to show up for ourselves. And I always feel like it's the best learning environment when things are messy. If we're not in a relationship or we're in our own place, it's pretty easy to be, for the most part, to be good. When we're in challenging times, it's the best training ground for showing up for ourselves.
And just to finish this one off, I think it's really interesting because, especially when we are in a family with addiction, we get really comfortable being uncomfortable. And so the idea of setting boundaries, if it's not something you're extremely comfortable with, can be daunting and feel very uncomfortable to speak up for yourself differently. And just as a reminder, you're likely already really uncomfortable. That's just normal for you. So this is just a shift in what's uncomfortable, and this is going to draw you into getting into the version of your life you want to be in.
One last thing I want to say. You can always fall back on speaking from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
You can always fall back on saying, this conversation's hard for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sad. This is uncomfortable. I'm sad that I'm setting this boundary. I need to take a pause.
Mm-hmm.
I could come up with 1,000 little phrases, but it's always like if you get into a pickle while you're in a conversation with your loved one and it just feels like it's gaining speed, going south, not working out the way you had hoped, it's always okay to just stop it and to say, I'm really not knowing where to go with this conversation and I just want to take a pause. This isn't productive. So there you have it. It's a start. It's just starting slowly, simply to have these ideas and these conversations and dialogues so that you can feel empowered to start to create change in your life.
So this next one is to simplify your life. When everything feels so overwhelming, and understandably, when you find out or realize that your loved one is struggling with addiction, there's so much fear associated with that. What do I do next? What is this going to look like? It's really hard to not go to the results of the situation and be in the future. And this is when we like to suggest simplifying and making everything small and just doing what you need to.
It's always like a gravitational pull to be busy so that we don't have to be with ourselves. And because it's uncomfortable to have that silence. And it's so important at this time to cancel engagements, to really take a look at your schedule and map out your schedule, put in your self-care, and do a lot of things that are going to support your own wellness. Simplifying our life is in tandem with feeling some emotional organization. When our life is complicated and we have a lot of things going on and we're running here and there, it's very challenging to have a sense of emotional organization. Now, a lot of you guys might have, kids and jobs or elderly parents and children and things that complicate and busy your life. And even in the face of having those things in your life, we still get to define our priorities. And part of our own part in this disease, family addiction, is that we have to be accountable to ourselves. And people pleasing, not knowing how to say no, feeling overly responsible for everything, those are things that need to start to shift in our own lives so that we can start to set boundaries and take care of ourselves. And you're going to see how all of this weaves together, assessing the situation, setting boundaries, simplifying your life. These are all steps we've both taken to be in our best lives, and we continue to take it. There isn't really a destination for this. These are tools that hopefully these will be the gifts that keep on giving.
That you can use in any situation, even if it's not related to family addiction. If it's just a toxic relationship or a work situation, they're really applicable to different areas. I think another thing to touch on is that when we stay overly busy, I remember growing up when Dad was going through his alcoholism, I swear you were on every board. You were so busy doing carpool, being a mom, working, all the things. And I remember you slowly start to let go of those as you started working on yourself. And I think, just my experience of staying overly busy and doing my own work around that is it really gives us a false sense of control. When we're feeling powerless, when we are powerless over our loved one, over how their struggles affect the family over our codependency, our people pleasing, and it builds up. There's so much powerlessness and understandable fear and anxiety associated with it. So to service that anxiety, a lot of times we try and cram it all in and plug it up so that it doesn't drain out. We don't have to feel it. And unfortunately, while this may work momentarily and allow us to be in a space of denial or to feel a sense of control, eventually it blows and you have all of the feelings and all of the fear and it all draining out, and it feels like it's crashing around you. So I think it's important to know how we service our anxiety and our fear in this situation.
100%. And simplifying our life might look also like getting organized about what our basic needs are. Are we meal prepping? Are we, going to Traders and getting ready-made meals? What's the plan? And just looking at the different areas of your life and starting to map out what that plan is so that life runs a little bit more smoothly in the areas that we can control. And the fourth step is finding your tribe. And this was especially important when my life was blowing up. I was just starting, or actually I had been going to Al-Anon for a while, but that was the first step of finding my tribe. When I walked into those rooms, and I didn't feel, the very first time I went to Al-Anon, I didn't feel like, oh my God, I've landed. These people get me. I was more in a state of shock that I needed to be in that place. It's different for everyone. Al-Anon is one place, but finding your tribe, whether it's, acupuncture, chiropractic care, your church or synagogue counselor, your therapist, support group, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, whatever that looks like for you, it's important to find your tribe. And I feel like when we go through these where there's addiction in the family or we're in a very toxic relationship, it's challenging because our loved ones want to give us a lot of advice and they want to give us their opinions. And sometimes that's not helpful because there are ulterior motives going on, well-intentioned while they may be. It's challenging to have a lot of cooks in the kitchen. And so really identifying, what does this look like for me? I know that when I was about to get separated, I literally felt like I was starting to get very ill, physically ill, and which stress can do that to us. And I ended up having like one thing after the other happen. And so at that time, I was in acupuncture. I went to my chiropractor. I was in Al-Anon. I was in therapy. I had a women's group that I attended once a week. There were, and that's different. I want to say, it sounds like a lot. That's different from simplifying your life. I simplified my life so I could find my tribe and have time for all that self-care, because during the time of crises, that was the most important thing for me that I relied on, helping me to be strong and to feel grounded enough to be able to move forward in my daily life.
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. I think there's so much shame when it comes to family addiction, and when we're isolated and we're not immersed in a tribe, whatever that looks like, even if you're not openly talking about it with everyone in your tribe, it reduces shame and it allows us to feel connected and to feel supported and to heal. And part of finding your tribe is getting vulnerable, allowing people in, and accepting support. And so it can be a process to build the tribe. And why we recommend things such as Al-Anon or Nar-Anon or support groups is there's something really incredible about being with people who either have experienced similar or the same thing, are in the throes of it. And there's a power in that connection and in hearing their experience, strength, and hope, or just feeling like, hey, I'm not alone in this. It's not just me going through this. It can reduce shame. It gives us that connection, and it allows us to help ourselves.
And also not everybody can jump into acupuncture or go to a chiropractor. I mean, those things do cost money, and depending on what kind of insurance you have, they can be things that just aren't available. So being mindful of the financial end of this, which is why for over a decade we've offered a free support group. I went to a free support group when I was going through it with your addiction. And Al-Anon is the sister meeting to AA, and you can go to online meetings or their in-person meetings morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week. Same with the Nar-Anon if your loved one has a narcotics addiction versus an alcohol addiction, although for Al-Anon you can really go no matter what the substance is. And so I just think being aware that your tribe is going to be a support around you that feels like it helps you to move through a very challenging time.
So our final step is to create and implement a self-care routine. And when you are going through it and you're in fear and you're anxious and maybe you have kids or loved ones you're taking care of, the idea of simplifying, putting yourself first, and implementing a self-care routine can seem over the top. That's not going to happen. This is wild. And we are here to talk to you about little things you can do, even if it's, 1 minute, to start practicing putting you first, because it all ties together of you speaking up for yourself, making sure you're safe, simplifying your life, getting support, and really prioritizing you.
And there will be a hesitancy to doing this. It's the oddest thing, because have you ever done something that feels really great, like stretching out or working out or having a good food day, whatever it might be, and you think, why am I not doing this all the time? It feels so good. There's a hesitancy when we're flooded with a challenging time and our cortisol's through the roof and we're in fight or flight mode or freeze. That's what we end up doing basically, is we kind of freeze and we hesitate to do that 1 minute meditation or write a page in our journal or even 3 sentences or stretch out on a floor mat. So what I've told clients that I'm helping through this is put a reader in the bathroom. Like for me, it was Courage to Change or One Day at a Time in Al-Anon. It's literally a small page to read. And when I'm on the toilet, read the page. And that was my self-care for the day when I first started, because my kids were little. My late ex-husband was a juvenile diabetic, type 1 diabetic. It used to be called juvenile. And we had so much chaos in our house. I was working, finishing up my master's. There was so much going on at the time. And so for me, my self-care was grabbing that time in the bathroom. And I know that sounds funny, but we have to get it where we can. And I'm all about, let's make it as easy as possible. There's a great app called the Hourly Chime. It has like a little bell that goes off at the top of each hour. And that's also a great way to do a check-in or a little, gratitude, setting things up like that for yourself so that there's very little work to it. We all get into bed at night and sometimes we fall asleep immediately when we hit the pillow. You can also download an app and do a little meditation once you lay down. There's so many ways that we can build our self-care routine, shift up how we're eating.
Make your bed in the morning.
Exactly.
It can start really small, and we recommend it start really small and progress from there. And each time you engage in doing a self-care routine or an exercise, you are in fact exercising a muscle that is reminding you to choose you and to put yourself first. And so it all ties together in all of this of you learning your needs, you taking care of yourself, you express what you need and get support.
And ask yourself, what is my commitment to change? because if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so in order for change to take place, we have to have a plan. But like Lyle said, start small. It could just be one thing a day. And that one thing will lead to 2 and 3 and 4. And ask yourself, what is my commitment and how am I going to stay accountable to that commitment?
So we went through the 5 things you can do now if you found out or realized your loved one is struggling with addiction. And we have a couple other resources that we want to share with you before we wrap up.
The first one is a support group that we offer. It is the first and third Tuesday evening of every month. It is at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time via Zoom. We do have one request that your cameras be turned on to keep it safe. It's super intimate. And then we also have an awareness tracker available on Amazon. It's a 60-day journal, and we are giving you the PDF version of that with your membership. If you would like to order the actual journal, you can go onto Amazon and order that. But that will help with everything we talked about, because it is a daily mindfulness practice that helps you bring in the day with intention, map out your self-care, and then close out the day. See what wins you had and what shifts you would like to make for the next day. And
our last one is the class we did on overcoming codependency. So when you are in a family with addiction, you're either going through it, you're over the haul of it, codependency can come up a lot in your life. Taking someone else's temperature to read your own, walking on eggshells around others' behaviors or actions. And we go into detail in this class on where does it come from? Why do we do it? What happens in these toxic dynamics, and how can you push through it and make some shifts so that you are not a slave to codependency anymore.
It's so helpful. And that truly is the gift that keeps on giving, because we took all of the things that were helpful for us in our journey, being in the trenches with loads of therapy and treatment and family,
AA.
You name it. Like we've
done it.
we've gotten a lot of help for ourselves, which has been amazing. So we tried to roll that into our online course on codependency, and hopefully you will be able to incorporate a lot of those things into your own life. And then when we all get together in our face-to-face time, you'll be able to ask loads of questions about, anything that you have, how to implement this into your own situation.
Yeah. So thanks for listening. We hope this was helpful for you guys.
Yes, we hope this helps.